All right, so welcome to this podcast called Working with Our Perfectionism. My name is Scott Engler. I am a published author, and I help people mainly with professional branding for their career and business development on LinkedIn. And so, as a recovering perfectionist, today's topic I want to talk about working with our perfectionism. And so, a quote that I recently came to mind was like, what's better than perfection? And if I'm talking to somebody that is a perfectionist and I said, there's something that's better than perfection, I could almost guarantee that a few things will happen. Either they'll have this like blank stare because they just don't believe it, or they're going to be really excited and say like, what? There's something that's better than actual perfection? So yes is the answer to that. And here's what I mean. So perfection is an illusion. And what I've found when I'm getting into perfection, whether it be, a big one for me was writing, projects, a lot of times when I'm doing something new, there's like this tendency to want to have it be perfect or have the conditions be perfect in order for me to do something, like even a podcast, like having everything needing to be perfect in my mind in order to start, or a lot of times the perfectionism holds us back from finishing. And so what I've found throughout my life is there is something that's better than perfect. And that, for me, that has required a certain level of experimentation and also a level of awareness of what works best for me. And so I'll give you a perfect example. A little over a year ago, I made a decision to quit smoking again for the second time. And rather than wanting to do it perfectly or quit cold turkey, or, read the perfect book, or go on, the best perfect plan to quit smoking, I did something different. And I said, you know what? I'm smoking, at this point I was smoking like a pack a day. That was the most I'd ever smoked. I was up from like half a pack for the previous years. But I bought this vapor, this thing that, has gotten popular, which is like these vapor mods, they call them. And my goal wasn't to give up cigarettes altogether. My goal was to reduce the amount of cigarettes that I smoked. Because I know in the past when I make things so all or nothing, it actually causes a lot more stress and usually more harm than good. So what I've learned to do is to kind of look at things more creatively and say, well, smoking 2 cigarettes a day is a hell of a lot less than smoking 20 cigarettes a day. And that is a huge improvement. And not only that, but the task doesn't seem as daunting. And when you look at the bigger picture too, and you think if you're going to take on a new goal or task, the stress that is induced by trying to do something perfect, which isn't possible, by the way, or do something that the way that we think is like the only right way to do it, could actually be more harmful than the benefit that you're thinking is going to be so great. So what ended up happening with this story was, I think I was smoking 2 or 3 cigarettes a day. I just kind of picked the times that were, the most, I guess, like just like the times that would have been the hardest to not smoke, and was smoking this vapor, which I started feeling better already. And then I went on a trip, maybe a couple weeks after. I said, you know what? I'm just going to leave my cigarettes at home and see what happens. And that was over a year ago, and I'll say that I have not had 1 cigarette since, which has been awesome. And so the reason I'm sharing that is, again, to me, that's better than if I would have tried to do it perfectly, right? Because when I've tried to do perfect things in the past, whether it be diets, projects, I get super stressed out. I'm so rigid. I'm so, focused on doing it perfect that I forget just about the process to begin with. And, I'll give you another story. Is I went over to my buddy's house over the weekend, and he had literally said, he's like, I've spent 12 hours putting together this slideshow for my daughter's birthday. 12, in like the last 3 days. He looked, completely disheveled, was tired. And when I sat down and was looking at him, he was like missing, like we were trying to get music on the right slides, and he kept like skipping over slides. And just his short-term memory was shot because he hadn't been getting much sleep. And that's like a perfect example, is like he was trying to have the perfect songs on the slideshow with all the best pictures and just have it flow perfectly. And now he's tired, not well rested for his daughter's birthday. He's cranky, and he's missing all these cues to, that are simple for me because I'm just coming in new and I'm not like so fixated on having this be perfect. And my point is that why not think that by trying to do something perfectly, by having something have zero errors, especially when it's something new that we've never done before, to make it have this perfect illusion is actually going to make us more stressed out and less effective. And so better than perfect is when we understand that fine line between doing our best and when it's just gone too far. And looking at the bigger picture and is like, okay, well, if I'm spending 15 hours preparing for a speech and trying to make the presentation and the words perfectly or whatever, the perfect time, it has to be 15 minutes exactly, and it can't be 15 minutes and 15 seconds, whatever it is. Not only am I driving myself nuts, but I'm going to be so exhausted, rigid, stressed out. When I actually give the speech, it will not be as effective. The benefit that the thing that I was fearing, which is, whatever it is like, it's not going to be great, people aren't going to get the help they want, blah, 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 is actually going to be more true in my experience by trying to be perfect than it is when I'm just doing something great and then I know when to say good enough and walk away. And sometimes for me, one area where I've seen that, where I've been able to work with my perfectionism, and the reason I say working with my perfectionism is because when you look at perfectionism, aside from the fear component, right? Because, there really is a masked fear and perfectionism of not being good enough. And so that's one, component of it. And the other component that's a little bit better, I would say, for at least speaking for myself, is wanting to do an excellent job. And that's a great component of it. And there's just, again, a fine line, and that looks differently for each person. So to be sloppy and not care is obviously on one extreme, and then to be perfectionistic is on the other extreme. So what I've found, I'll give an example of working with my perfectionism, right? Because truly, if I work with the part of me that wants to do excellent work, then I learned that by setting goals that are more realistic and manageable and feel better to overcome while still challenging myself is better overall, right? Because if I could, there's good stress and bad stress. And so if I could do things that where it's more of a good challenge, rising to the task, committing to excellence and overall less stressed, I know that in the end, it's better than perfect, because when I'm trying to do perfect, I'm not going to be as effective with whatever it is I'm trying to share. My well-being won't be as good, especially if I'm doing something publicly or whatever it is. And so the better than perfect component is when I find that balance. And so with my articles, what I learned is when I started writing articles, and I think this would be like a 1,000-word article, some of them would take me anywhere between 8 to 10 hours. Now, for anyone that's written or blogs, that is a crazy amount of time. And it's not because I don't write fast or whatever. It's because my perfectionism. I'd write an article, and then I'd go back and I'd change a paragraph. And then I'd go back and I'd change a sentence. And then I'd go back and I'd change a word. And then I'd change the structure of the word. And every time I would go back or keep looking, something just didn't sound the right way anymore, and I wanted to change it. And so what I've learned to do is when I get to that place, well, first now when I write an article, I usually just hammer it out, and then I take a break. And so I might give myself like an hour, hour and a half. It just kind of depends on the article and amount of words. But I'll do it in a burst, and then I'll give myself a break, and I might come back to it later that evening. It just really depends on the situation and time I start. And then when I come back, I'll catch anything I want to add or any major grammatical errors. And then I might just kind of read and feel the energy. But when I see myself starting to change this sentence and change this word and change that, and when I start seeing that cycle, I stop. And I've learned to do it, and it's just like as soon as that I see that happening, I'm like, okay, I become more aware of it, and I just stop, and I'm like, you know what? This is good enough. I know how this ends, and then I've learned to just post it. Even though sometimes I'm afraid, oh my God, it's not going to look good, blah, 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 I post it. So anyway, that is the topic for today, working with our perfectionism. We'd love to hear anybody's thoughts. I hope this helps you guys in your business or personal lives. Stay tuned for next time.